We're starting. Welcome to our World Goodwill Interview today. It's April the 19th, 2018. Your co-hosts today are myself, Dominic Dibble, and here in London, and my colleague, Kathy Newburn, who's in New York. And today we'll have the pleasure of speaking with Karen Elkins, who also spoke at our 2017 seminar in New York, which was titled From the Unreal to the Real, Discerning Truth, Cutting Through the Glamour of the Times. And that meeting, Karen's presentation took us on a dazzling visual journey into the connections between science and spirituality. Karen originally worked in advertising. She set up her own agency at the age of 23. She then moved on to the field of progressive education, co-founding the Silbury Education and Resource Centre for Gifted and Creative Learners in 2004. And out of this work, there was a further evolution, and her latest venture is the e-magazine Science to Sage, which describes itself as the synthesis of new science and ancient wisdom. It makes the mystical accessible while exploring the unifying principles that connect us all. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us your time to explore in more depth some of your work.
And thank you for having the interest. I appreciate that.
And well, I'm sure we're going to go all over the universe and what we're going to say, but I'll start off with something that came out for me from the presentation you made in New York. And what I got from it was a real passion for identifying relationships that have been perhaps neglected. For example, the connections we have with other kingdoms in nature. And it's often bridged by the subtler aspects of water, light, and electricity. Could you share something about how this passion evolved for you? Where did that come from?
Seeing the interconnectedness of things, I think began when I actually did start the school and I was redoing curriculum. And the more I did, the more I saw. But the whole idea when I started it was to do an interdisciplinary sort of program so the kids could see across disciplines. And the more I did it, my dyslexic tendencies tends to see things more patterns and pattern connects. And then when I started putting on events and hosting people in science, everything just started connecting. And having done the magazine and done, at this point in time, over 50 of them, you begin to look at nature with wisdom. And as your meditation groups are called the triangle seems to be the foundation for a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And that actually starts with what you're talking about, with the idea of light triangulates. And it has its three colors that are its primary source. Water triangulates and starts out as tetrahedrons, and molecules bond in threes. So when you start seeing how the universe is one thing, and when you look at just the fundamental forces of nature or the states of matter, they go from one phase to another. So we always think of them as unique and different, but as they always say in all the spiritual text, there's one thing. And it's just one thing rotating from one state to another. And then you begin to see that even based on your hand and your body's proportions, they're still based on threes, which is the golden mean, and how everything, it's called, to me, I call it the golden thread, and how everything spins out of these forces. And it's beautiful. And then you get to be in a state of awe.
Well, that's a very beautiful state to be in, isn't it? Of course, and what you're saying, I think, inspiring awe. This relates to something I was thinking of asking you about. The idea you're trying to stimulate the imagination. Obviously, when you're being involved with gifted children, that's something that would come out anyway. And I suppose that's when you started talking to the different experts as well, that awe, imagination, and feeding that sense of wonder was something that was very important for you at Silbury.
You know what? It didn't start out feeling it to be that way, to be honest. I think what I was trying to do when I started the school was to make sure that we're all unique and we're all somewhere on that rainbow. And on that rainbow of light, there are coordinates and nodal points, of which you are a little different than I am, and Kathy's a little different, and everybody's that way. So the question is, when you're doing an educational thing, is how do you meet the needs, the unique needs of children? And every grade was different. And it was, how do you tap into their need to fulfill on their destination? So every time when I started the school, it didn't start out that way. It started out just fulfilling the unique thumbprint that that person needed to satiate for their own exploration in this dimension. And then the more I learned and the more I saw, then the more I was riveted and the more I was driven and the more that I learned. And the beautiful tool for the magazine is every time you have a thought, you can go down any channel and start learning and start exploring and making phone calls and emails and threading things and then threading more things. And one thing led to the next to the next. And just when you think you've got it, it's like, oh, there's more and there's more and there's more. And there's another story and another way somebody tells it. So there's an endless way of exploring and discovering. So do you have a thought about that?
Kathy, you look like you've got something on the tip of your tongue.
Well, there could be so many questions for Karen with your encyclopedic understanding and expression. It's wonderful to have you, as Dominic said.
Thank you.
Along the lines of education, as you know, we're sort of in a crisis situation, it seems, in that the consciousness of children today is expanding rapidly, yet the school systems are having somewhat of a trouble keeping up. And what are your thoughts on what are the most essential things that we need to do right away to better meet the needs of children today?
Well, I can only share my experiences, and what I noticed with the kids is when you have a unique thumbprint, you need to find your value, and you need to have your like, for example, I will say that I had one group of kids who wanted nothing but politics and science. So there was a way of weaving things for them to create a multidisciplinary approach. The next group wanted environment and wanted different things. If you are, as an individual, your reason to be, the reason you've come to explore, is put into a box that is standardized and unfulfilling for the individual, then that actually is a crisis for the soul. That is where I see a lot of kids saying, well, what's my purpose? Why am I here? And if you're not engaging them in ways, or parents are not taking the time to engage with the children and allowing them and supporting them in their passions, then the whole reason for actually existing, we've missed the whole boat. So, you know, we can stamp that somebody's brilliant. I mean, having worked with giftedness, and there's a vast variety of that. You can look at it as those who can they have the photographic memory, but that is not in itself giftedness. And then there are those who have an abundance of creativity. And I look at what, you look at what somebody like Walter Russell said, it's the bridging of the two. It's one thing to, you don't need a robot to go to innovate something. What you really need is somebody who has the creative capacity to think in new ways, but you still have to have the fortitude to go make it happen. So I think when we're looking at education, you have to teach children how to explore and keep learning. You have to engage them in the reason to be. And that's why I think so many kids get to college and a majority of them think they want to do one thing and then switch gears. And it's because they haven't had that passion to explore, or that's been taken out of them, or the reason to be. So to me, fundamentally, education point blank, That is what it should be about. It should be about your own personal exploration to do the things you need to do. And there are ways, and I've seen some teachers do it, where they rework curriculum a bit relative to the bias of a classroom.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, one of the things that is what you yourself have spoken about, how you respond much more effectively to visual presentation of ideas, and that's what Science to Sage is about, isn't it? It's about creating images that make connections and present these new ways of blending science and spirituality. And I mean, that's one of the things I assume that some of the children would be similar in that sense. They would be more likely to respond to visual presentation of ideas. Now, obviously, I've got 2 kids, and they're always watching YouTube. I need to be a bit careful with them because, you know, there is visual presentation of ideas, and then there's visual overload, isn't there? So that's another thing that we have to be aware of, isn't there? And the current moment, if you like, that there's so many images that.
Dominic, think of it 2 ways. One is there's different kinds of learners.
Sure,
so
sure,
a
absolutely.
third of the learners need the visual part.
Mm-hmm.
I, being dyslexic, I need to see the pattern connects. And when I went back to school when I was in my, I think I was 50, to go take a class in anatomy.
Okay.
And when I did that, I realized that I, as reading a book, would read a chapter and couldn't remember it. If I hadn't drawn the pictures and put things relative to it, it was like I had never read it. And that was shocking to me. I mean, then I had to think about myself as a kid and what was happening. So I know a third of the learners are visual. And I will tell you, when I created what I created, there were a small little group that if they didn't get to do those tests and get to be drilled, they were not happy campers. So there were, I brought in tons of hands-on visual and things. Again, it wasn't also for everybody. So there's still different profiles you need to meet. I myself, when I do the magazine, with people's time as short as it is and so many demands, for me, if you can take the magazine, you can skim through it. I highlight things, I create visuals so that people can understand and see things. Where, I mean, having done a radio show before, I had read a lot of books. There's a lot of books that tell you what it is, but if you can't visualize what the water looks like, if you can't realize how the molecules are moving, if you can't see those bonds between water, light, and whatever, you might not get that full understanding. It may just be a concept, but when you see it, it makes it solid. So that is what, for me, made a huge difference. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. One of the things that I've been looking into recently is oral culture. You know, the way in which that's a whole other different way of teaching and learning that organizes your memory differently. So, you know, there are, and I think that's something that, again, there's so much emphasis on writing and the printed word that there are things that we need to explore there, I think, in our society. But at the moment, I'm just kind of waffling here. Kathy, do you have any?
Because a lot of the gifted kids have handwriting issues.
Right.
So part of what we needed to do, and the reason I did the educational format the way I did it under a homeschooling umbrella. And that allowed me not to have all certified teachers, but it allowed me to bring in handwriting experts. Okay. It allowed me to bring in PhDs to fulfill other needs, right? So I was able to step way out of the box and bring in experts for everything, go places, do things in ways that it would have been more like Buckminster Fuller had that vision. I actually did that one where I brought in experts for everything. Great. So that was the fun thing, and the kids loved it. I mean, they did everything from PhDs to handwriting experts to Reiki. They learned the conventional stuff, and they looked at alternative things as well as to expand their minds. So education doesn't have to be so boring. So what we did, thinking of handwriting as such an emphasis, we did a bridging between kids could give us different ways of presenting, but we also did filming, we did animation, we did robotics. So it worked in ways for them to stretch their own imagination and for them to become a creator and to present their own essence.
I wanted to switch gears just a little because, as you know, we're living through an extremely difficult period in the history of humanity on planet Earth. And many people have tremendous fears and apprehensions about what's really happening here. But I wonder what your perspective is on this time in planetary history.
I think we have created the conundrum that we have by many different things. But here's the interesting part. When you actually look at history, it goes up and down in cycles. This uproar, even by us, as I'm going to call ourselves more the masses, is a time that even at the turn of the century, the last one, there were tons of revolutions for exactly the same reason, for the inequities that go on the planet. There seems to be, if you look at science, a repeating pattern. You can see it with fractals. You can see it in the wave where we ride up and down, where we've gone through such an imbalance that then it'll have to balance itself. But there's always been war. There's always been famine. There's always been all of these things. And it's unfortunate in my own mind because I think part of the human story and part of the human condition is that hero's journey. And very few people take it because a lot of people want predictability. And so we don't step up into the forefront and make the changes and do the things that are right and bold. And And we're taught even from early on to be submissive. And at this point in time, we're on the edge. And I'm going to just say for myself, I am sick and tired of the bullies. You know, we have all of these heads of governments that are always the ones running what I'm going to call us minions and telling us how to think and what to do. That's why we're talking, when we talked about the lecture, the glamour of the times, by all the virtue of advertising, which I used to be one, you're supposed to look a certain way and be a certain way. It's not about you being you. And that goes back from childhood, right? So how do we embody and empower the essence of what we've come here to be with the essence of kindness, with the essence of righteousness, to be honest? I see a lack of integrity and a lack of forthright in a lot of things that I've seen. And it's stunning to me. It's stunning to me. We as people need to get back to human values that actually bring on the conditions that we want. So we need to step into that place, which I think, that's what what your foundation is all about, which is, beautiful.
It's certainly part of what we try to promote. And I think obviously the ideas that you've just talked about, we think about it in terms of what's called the world servers, people who are willing to take on the responsibility for what's happening in the world at the moment. And I think that's where it's interesting. What obviously a lot of what these servers are doing at the moment is finding ways to bridge between different areas. And obviously that's something that you're trying to do, and some of the people that you're working with are trying to do. And you're talking about heroism, and I think that's another way of describing it, and truth-telling. And I just wondered if, going a little bit back to Science to Sage, which is what you're sort of encountering these different truth-tellers who are trying to find ways of shining a light on science and on spirituality and saying, well, actually, maybe the story isn't quite as we used to think it was, and maybe we need to take another look at it. Do you have a sense that there are, well, you do have a sense, but who do you think are the more important people who are really shining the flashlight on these different stories and saying, well, look, we've got to re-examine them?
There are certain people that have had, some of them are the biggies and some of them are not, right? That's what I love about doing the magazine is I have all the biggies in the magazine, but I also have a lot of innovative thinkers who really thinking out of the box where I can bridge it. And the usual suspects are somebody like one of my foundational person was Greg Braden. The other thing that got me thinking more were science and spirituality, which is a big shift for me, was looking at some of the Eastern traditions. Mm-hmm. And then when I've done the magazine, you can take people like, there's a young man named John Depew. There are people like Richard Merrick. These people have gone through and looked at science in the sense that when you start looking at it, it is what the ancient religions were about, but not metaphorically, literally. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned to discover over time is even if you look at the Christian church to the monks, the icons, the dress, the sacred geometry, everything is the same. So it appears to me at some point in time in history, there was one story. And then as something happened, things got sort of fractured off. People made a little bit more of their own stamp to it. But it appears very clearly that there are some very, very same things. And as we look at a lot of the religion and a lot of the tensions going on in the world based on that or used by that, it almost seems silly. Because there is only one source, no matter what you want to call it. There is only one science that is, and there's only, to me, it's crazy to go persecuting, killing, or doing something for, if you actually really looked, it's, and it says in every tradition, it's right inside of you, right here. You can call on it any time because it's right here, and you can. I mean, that's actually the work of Greg Braden at the moment, where he says, put your hand on your heart. Can't you feel it? And if you do, it will change the chemistry in you as you do it. And you try it, you'll feel it. And you can see that whether it's the Sacred Heart or the Heart Sutra or whatever it is, there's lots of commonalities, and we just need to find common ground and then appreciate the diversity that nature brings, that people bring, the beauty and the differences. I mean, honestly, would you want to eat a hamburger every day of the week? And the answer is no. I mean, in every big city these days, right, that you can go to any place and get Thai food or Indian food, you name it, Italian food. But thank goodness. So when we look at perspectives, I mean, it's not any different. That each one shines a light on something unique and special, but there's a lot of similarities. So my dream would be that people could find the common ground and accept the diversity and live in peace.
Amen.
Amen.
The solution is we should each eat a different kind of food every day. that might go some way to. And it is actually, I mean, although in one sense that sounds like a silly thing, it's true that simply encountering a different cuisine, a different kind of music, it starts to change how you think. And some people feel that, I think part of the problem that we have is that some people feel very threatened by change and don't want it to change, and they're quite happy with the way things are. So they would rather have a hamburger every day, or they would rather, And
it's interesting when you go back to that and you look at science, the way your whole body is an electrical system. Your eyes, your ears, every sensory part of you is electric. Yes. So when you look at how we think and do things, it's based on charge. Right. And so if there is an uncomfortable or something that you're not familiar with and you're not used to stepping in, that change may bring a like or a sense of anxiety for some people because they don't know what they're stepping into. And I think I remember starting the ad agency at 23 and I was petrified. How am I gonna come up with another idea over and over and over again? And you know what? It's like the magazine. It shows up. You have a question, you have a thing, it shows up. You step into it. And for me, I love learning something new. For me, that is my charge. So everybody's different, right? But for a lot of people, that unknown is just way too scary.
Mm.
But that's like, that sends fear through because maybe the unknown was scary before. And we're all based on patterns, repeating patterns. Have you ever dated somebody and it's felt like you've dated that same person before? Right? You pick the same pattern, you pick the same outcome, you pick the same whatever.
I haven't done a lot of dating, so I can't really.
So you've stayed with the one. Well, that's good for you. Good for you.
Pretty much, yeah.
I've made my own mistakes. But I was married for 23 years for one. Anyway, enough of that. But again, things tend to pattern. So matter and pattern is mother and father, and it's the repeating patterns sometimes of generations. And that's why when we sometimes look at even sicknesses that reoccur in families, that's something that happens, a repeating pattern, because we do the same habitual things.
Mm-hmm.
So
in terms of your work with various scientists and creative thinkers and your own explorations of the inner realms, could you tell us any of the interesting work that's being done to do that, to bridge between this reality, this concrete reality, and the more subtle realities? Is there anything that you could share with us that's being done that might be of interest?
Well, I'm going to say that's an ongoing thing. The one person that I've actually really, really liked, and I used to host him, was Dr. Joe Dispenza. Mm-hmm. And the reason I like Joe's work is it does do meditation. He does a lot of that. We're talking about habitual patterns, and he'll say, if you keep doing, the same personality, the same thing will recreate the same thing. So you've got to make a change. So what I like about Joe's work, he invites you to have a vision and something and then focus on it and rework it. Because when we're looking at patterns, everything in the universe that we do, from our body structures to everything, is literally a pattern. We're a 5-star. You look at different things and they're a pattern. So what he invites us to do is rethink and recreate new patterns. And that's just taking molecules and rearranging them in different ways, but you have to do it in a way to sustain it. And you have to do it in a way that fixes. They always say patterns take like 21 or 30 days in order for them to happen. And when I have done his meditations and his work, which are not different than a lot of others either. So I think that science has not changed. A lot of things haven't changed, just a way of engaging in it in this time. It does transcend. It takes you into other realms. I mean, I look at Joe, and I used to host him, and he'd go, "How you doing?" I go, "I don't know, Joe, how am I doing?" Because he could see my aura. He could see how I'm doing. I was never going to fool him one way or the other. And so, you know what? That's one person's work who I really like. And I will say, for all of the other things I have ever done, I've done breath work. That's been awesome. I've done past life regression. That's been awesome. Everything has been a tool in the toolbox. Using music is a tool in the toolbox. And that's what I look at. Everybody has, whether for some people it's a walking meditation or whatever, there is no one way for any one person to arrive at what they need at their next level. There have been times when I've had my own personal crisis, and the only answer to transcending any of that has been prayer. And where then I'm divinely guided to the answer to solve the problem. And I have to say, of all of them, that has been the most profound. Is ask and the door shall be open. And and praying with such fervor that, you know, it's like, okay, we better open the door because she's really means it. Again, that goes back to the passion, right? So that's just been my experience. And I know everybody has a different way, but those have been for me and the people that I've experienced and written about. And again, a miracle is it literally a chemistry, it's a change of state. So it is a working and a reworking of our thought patterns. We are thought beings. We are mind kind. That is, when we get stuck in patterns and stuff, that's the hardest thing to do. But it is the thing that is most required for change. And that's where I think, when I think of the media, we were talking about glamour, what does the media do? And the media at this point in time is setting in fear. It's setting in all kinds of things. It is creating division in every part of its conversation. Every story seems to be one that creates division, as opposed to creating an understanding. So I think there's a story being perpetuated for us to feel the way we do, where I know a lot of people who've just turned off the news because they don't want to feel that way, and they don't feel that way, and they're not buying into that story. And so I think that is, to me, not glamorous for what they're doing. I think what it is, it's incredibly destructive to the human spirit and the soul, and to the spirit of what we need to do and be. So
certainly in the Alice Bailey tradition, the idea of glamour is that something very, it can be extremely negative and misleading and poisoning almost the atmosphere of human thought and human feeling. And I think that's certainly one of the things that we try to do in World Goodwill, is to look for those people who are dispersing glamour, if you like, by the light and the energy of what they're doing, and which I think is exactly what you're trying to do too. You're trying to find those people and connect them and give them a platform. So I think it's this beautiful work, and we're all trying to do the same thing, just in different ways, aren't we? I think.
Yeah, you're in your library. It's massive. I mean, it's big. And as as I started reading some of it, it's like Yahoo. I mean, it's fabulous stuff. I mean, it's like, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I got it. And what I've been searching for, it's as you have it. So you know what? The beautiful thing is, there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing, and it's been there. And we just seem to have to rediscover it, redo it for every process that we go through. Mm-hmm. And I love it.
That's why it's called the ageless wisdom.
It is ageless. It is, because it's the same wisdom that we circulate, and that every time we incarnate, we get deeper, bigger, better, whatever, right? It is the force that drives us to become more, live in integrity.
Yeah.
And it's true. I think that it's the ageless wisdom. But I think the interesting thing, the challenge that there is, the bit that requires, if you like, the heroism and the truth telling, is the finding the way to interpret it to meet the needs of the times. So that, for example, the people who are scared of change, give it to them in a way that they won't be quite so scared. You can sort of maybe slightly sugarcoat it. Well, that's not quite the right word, but you know what I'm trying to. I'm trying to say is that you find the challenge is to find the ways to explain it so that it doesn't seem so terrible and so threatening.
Well, here's what's so interesting to me. For me, when I've done I'm almost done with my book. I'm having some technical issues that I'm having to deal with it. But it's interesting when I see the visuals of what it is that I'm showing. It makes it, to me, not a word book, but a picture book, because that's what it is. It makes it so clear why you are responsible for you, and why you are sending signatures and energy. And when you do speak, it was a scientist who, when I was at the school, he was doing robotics with the kids. We're having a casual conversation. He goes, you know, you speak in platonic solids. And I'm sitting there going, what are platonic solids? I mean, obviously now I know they're the building block. They're like the fractals, the things like whatever. They're also the building blocks of the periodic table. And it's like, what do you mean you do that? And then who's perfect? Dr. Emoto starts showing you the geometry of your speech. What is, thank you look like? What does devil look like? So you realize that when you're speaking into the energetic space, even you're thinking into the space, you are creating a message to the light of what you're being, because everything is light. And then when you realize that this is a beautiful living matrix, it's like you think you can hide in your shell. And I've met many quote unquote shy people who sit and they don't think they're transmitting anything. It's like, next. Okay. We're all transmitting because we're light beings. Mm-hmm. Some of us are more animated, more amplified, but that does not mean that you, in your wave function, don't phase other people. You're either in phase or out of phase, but that's still, that electromagnetic signature, it's still light.
Kathy and I are both nodding enthusiastically.
Yes, it's true. So there you go. You're sending out, you're your own little standing wave, mm-hmm. functioning identical to a TV set. Mm. So when you look at it that way, where you channel and where you tune in on the dial, pick your station. Literally your station in life.
It's what you said earlier about people tuning out from the station because there's so much that is discordant and kind of sort of dragging people down and giving people a picture that's, well, false in so many ways. That's what we're working to try and solve, I guess, is the, and I think that, that this idea of finding ways for science and spirituality to approach each other rather than remain divorced is very important. That's.
Okay, you know what the problem with some of that is, Dominique? Some of these really gifted kids are as dogmatic, narrow-minded.
Of course, yeah.
And so what happens is sometimes or the science world itself wants to maintain the status quo so they don't have to reprint books. But right now, we are at the force and at the place where, I'm sorry, we need a new science. And you, every time you don't get funding, you don't get whatever for it, right? But the stuff that looks so fundamental is so ignored. Like the fact that you and I are made of exactly the same stuff. Well, so is that chair. Mm-hmm. And so the interesting thing is we like to put everything in their boxes, and then like a little frog is still made of the same stardust that you are. So what makes it less conscious than you?
Well, right? Extremely good question.
I mean, what makes a leaf? Because they've seen leaves like in certain places respond. I have images that I think I showed even at the conference where you can send a leaf love and it begins to glow. Yeah. Right? And doesn't if now, if I send it to a child and I say, look how fabulous you are, doesn't that make them glow? Is it a different chemistry? Is it a different something? The answer is no. So it's like, hello, anybody home? And yet that would be like, I'm sorry, but that little piece of material is so much different. So then this one, they can't do the same thing. And it's like, I'm sorry, they're made of the same stuff. So, there has to be a level of information in the form and what it is, but we're still affecting things. I mean, the next conference I'm speaking at is for scientists. And it is for, the topic is mind, man, and machine and how we affect it. And how could that possibly be?
Mm-hmm.
there's a thing called, people called sliders. Have you ever heard of them? And this is not the hamburger. There are people who walk by streetlights and turn them off. People that walk up into computers and then blow them away, right?
Mm.
So there are people who have more energy, more fire, or, electricity running through them that affect things.
Sure.
Right? So, we're all the kind of the same sort of stuff. Some of us, again, more charged than others.
I'm restraining myself from starting to sing that Joni Mitchell song, "We Are Stardust."
Well, you realize that that's not so untrue.
Oh, I know, of course.
Yeah.
Still, well, I think we've. Do you have any more questions or comments you want to make, Kathy? I think we've reached a very nice sort of rounding off point there, but we could probably speak for our half an hour.
Maybe just one final grandiose thought about this idea that the earth is a living being and the interconnectedness of all life. Can you just wax poetic on that thought for a minute?
It goes back to exactly what we're talking about. And what's really interesting to me is the earth has something called the Schumann resonance. Mm-hmm. And the resonance of that thing, that field, is the same resonance that your head, your brain, and your heart resonate to. Mm-hmm. So when we think of what we are attracted to, whether when we fall in love or whatever, they say you can't be in love unless there's sympathetic resonance. Mm-hmm. So we, as the earth, attracted to the earth, this is our place at this point in time to be with. And we are becoming painfully aware that it too is no different than us. It is made with the same proportion of water. It has the same kind of electromagnetic field. So a way of visualizing it is we're like a battery pack, and so is it. So is the sun. So is everything else that dances around. Everything is intercreated. When you look at the ocean current belt, it's the same way your heart works. All these fields of information are alive and well. And we really do need to resonate, take care of it. We are its gardener, and it sustains us. It feeds us. It warms us. It bathes us. It gives us a space to have an experience called this living thing. But without it, we don't have a ground of existence. So it is through itself, like us, grows in the same way. So does that sort of answer it? We are here at this time for this purpose. It gives us life. And if it does, it must be alive. It operates on exactly the same principles. And so we are crazy when we do not honor the earth. And we're looking at the consequences of the oceans dying right now because of our lack of, but we forget that is where we actually get close to 70% of our oxygen, not just from the trees, but from the ocean. And so we are killing our own life force and source. It's like we are a cancer to it. We need to wake up. And I do not understand for the life of me how it is that our governments are so, we look to them to be the leaders, and yet they have let humanity and the planet and everything else down. And that's where, I know that there's, when I watched this movie Thrive a long time ago, and he said, there are more people doing good things, that just the list of them would circulate the world. Yeah. So I know humanity in itself is doing its best job. It just needs the resounding support of the powers that be. And if we actually put that energy into saving the planet and not in killing it with wars, we'd be in a whole lot better shape.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if that was poetic, but, but it was passionate. Yeah. So anyway, that's my thought.
Well, I think we've had a beautiful excursion through well, the various different places and mind and consciousness and education and the importance of education, the importance of truth-telling in the media, the importance of good leadership, which is another thing that we've dwelt upon in some of our work. So thank you so much, Karen, for your time and for your energy and for your passion. And
thank you.
I think we've got more than enough to put in the newsletter. We won't be able to get it all in.
No.
We'll have to distill it down to its essence. But there's a lot to distill down there. So thank you so much, Karen.
You're welcome. I think the one distilling thing is there's only one thing.
Yes.
There's one thing.
We'll distill down the light that was in there and the energy. The beautiful gem. I hope. That's part of my job. So thank you again.